Here's a little introduction about us. My name's Ethan, and I'm part of 21980 Red Pandas. I am on a robotics team for FPC. We have currently 13 members, and in this season, we got first place design award at ILT tournament, and we also participated in state championship. And our goal is to increase access to STEM and robotics for our community and connect it with other fields. And then we're also collaborating with Data at UCI, which is a student organization at UCI. And then they're focused on nurturing a community of UCI students who want to dive deeper into the data industry. And they aim to do this through workshop, professional panels, and speaker events. And they recently just had a data-thon where teams of college students competed to win prize pools up to $5,238. And now introducing our speaker.
Okay. Hi. Do you want me to just get started?
I think we have like a little intro for you.
Oh, okay. Hello, my name is Vivian Tran, and I'm currently a data scientist at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, also known as JPL, in Pasadena, California. And before I get started, for legal purposes, I want to say that all of my thoughts are my own and that my opinions and experiences aren't representative of JPL or NASA as an organization. Okay, so I work specifically on the IT business side, and I use data to help different groups on lab to answer any sort of business questions that they have. And I mainly work with the Office of Research and Development and the Office of Inclusion, but I've also had other groups like the Education Office reach out to me. And more people seem to be interested in understanding their data and using it to solve their problems. And there is a lot of data. So sometimes folks aren't sure where to even start. And that's where our team comes in. I work with a lot of text data. So I use natural language processing techniques to make sense of it all. And natural language processing, also known as NLP, is a branch of machine learning, and I've used it mainly for text classification and keyword extraction. And for those who aren't as familiar with these concepts, I'm basically trying to look at a bunch of text like research paper abstracts, and I'm trying to answer questions like, what kind of research are we doing with UCI based on the papers we collaborate with them on? And I've gotten really high level requests, like if a senator or someone important visits, leadership would want to answer questions like, what are all of the research areas we're doing with the state of Ohio? And that one's kind of like a weighted question. So it's a work in progress. And to communicate all of this information with leadership and non-technical folks, I use data visualization primarily in Tableau. There's other programs too, like Power BI, but our team primarily uses Tableau. And for some more on my background, I actually grew up in Orange County, like you all. So it's super cool to be here and talk with everyone. So after high school, I went to UC Santa Barbara for my undergrad. I graduated with a degree in statistics with the intention of working in the data science field. But before then, I thought I wanted to study econ. And when I realized how powerful statistics could be in storytelling, I decided to go all in. So no more econ. During my senior year, I did an internship at an environmental research center owned by UCSB. And this experience really helped me learn how to communicate with scientists who were extremely smart and knowledgeable with their fields, but they knew very little about how they should deal with their data. I was also involved with UCSB's Data Science Club, really similar to what UCI has, and I did my first data-focused hackathon with them. And like a month ago, I went to mentor for the first time at UCI's first data competition, so that was pretty cool. It came full circle. So I graduated in 2018, and then I went to work for the Navy, also as a data scientist for about 4 years. I worked in a similar role, but my focus was on facility data. So I would answer questions like, what kind of building emergencies are getting called in for a certain location, and why does it keep happening? I started applying to jobs again in 2022 just to see where I could get in. And eventually I got an offer last November. And I loved my job and I made one of my best friends there. So I wasn't eager to leave. but I had always wanted to work for a NASA center since I was like 5, so I couldn't turn it down. So that leads me to where I am today. And I've been here for only about 6 months, but I really love it here and I've met some really awesome people. And some of them are also in the call, which is cool.
Now for our closed Q&A session. So what inspired you to pursue this field?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, I really enjoy storytelling with the data. And it might be surprising, but I kind of struggled with math in high school and in college. Personally, I couldn't deal with how theoretical some of it felt. Like, when am I ever going to have to find the volume of a cone that's stuck into a sphere? So something like that, like, it was very hard to wrap my mind around. But when I first started my first statistics class, I could see how applied it was, and people were answering some really impactful questions using statistics. And then all of the concepts of trying to find the volume of a cone in a sphere, it kind of applies to statistics too when you get higher up. So then I saw the purpose of it. And I took my first data mining class in my senior year, which was where I first learned about machine learning. And I was floored at how creative you could actually get with approaching the data. And eventually, I knew that I wanted to work in a space that lets me use statistics to help people. And that's exactly where I ended up. So I mentioned publications earlier, but I also work with a ton of people data. And my work with the Office of Inclusion focuses on how we can make JPL an accessible and safe place for everyone, and also a place where every employee has equal opportunities to grow in their career.
Thank you so much. Next question. What is it like working as a data scientist at NASA?
So I can only speak for the NASA center I work at, which is JPL, but I really love it here. I won't shut up to my friends about this, but I feel so safe here as an Asian woman in the LGBTQ community. Like, we just had our Pride flag unveiling on Thursday, and it's like this massive rainbow flag on the side of one of our big buildings. And there's another one right outside the visitor center, so people see it pretty much first thing when they stop by. I'd never worked in a place like that before, so that was pretty cool. For my daily schedule, I don't know, I show up to work, I check my emails and messages, and I slowly chip away at this long to-do list that never ends. Some days I'll have a lot of meetings with team members or stakeholders. It's pretty chill. I like my supervisor a lot because we're given a lot of autonomy and independence on our projects. So there's not like a lot of micromanaging going on, which is really cool. And because the groups that I work with are still like very new to the data world, I get a lot of say on the direction of the projects, which is cool.
That's awesome, actually. So next question. How do you effectively communicate your findings to individuals outside of the data science field?
So I take full advantage of data visualization. So any tool out there. So there's built-in tools in Python. So a bunch of Python packages, R has a bunch of them. I use Tableau a lot because it's a lot easier to share with people so they don't have to actually run code. Other people use Power BI. But yeah, data visualizations. So data by itself is really boring, and it's just a bunch of numbers or text. Like, you can't even tell what you're looking at. Putting it on a dashboard and parsing it out into different views makes it easier to present during meetings, and it makes it a lot easier to share to non-technical folks. And also, I tend to avoid talking about actual machine learning concepts if it's not needed. And I always focus everything I present on the question they're trying to answer. For example, they're not going to care about what model I used exactly. They're going to care about the actual results and what they can do with it. So I focus the reporting to make it actionable.
Thank you so much for that info. All right, so next question. What was the most interesting challenge you've had so far in your career?
So honestly, learning how to communicate to different audiences, especially the non-technical people, has been the most challenging for me, and also the most interesting. It's not something they teach you in school, and you just learn over time after talking to so many individuals. And it also gets easier over time because you become more knowledgeable. And actually, the more knowledgeable you become, the easier it is to talk about things simply. And I try to adjust it to whatever audience I'm talking to.
Thank you so much. Next question. What skills are the most helpful in your job?
So the obvious ones are technical skills like learning to code in Python or R, statistics, using Tableau or Power BI for visuals. But I'm gonna go over some of the less obvious ones. So number one is learning how to pull and clean data properly, which is technical, but it takes some creative troubleshooting a lot of the time. In school, data comes in these cute, perfect little Excel files with properly named columns, no missing values, no duplicate rows. So in real life, you're lucky if the columns are even filled out properly. You learn to get really creative with what you have because sometimes they don't give you much. So for example, I work with text, and text data is completely unstructured. So that means it doesn't have any clear fields or columns. Like just imagine like a summary of a paper, and then you have to look at 7,000 summaries of papers. So I've had to get really creative with that to make it digestible for the machine learning models.
Yeah, I didn't really think about cleaning. So I also been trying to do data science. And so all the Google Excel sheets are like organized for me already. So like, yeah, that was something I didn't think of. Thank you so much. And then
Yeah.
how has artificial intelligence and machine learning affected your career?
Oh, actually, I forgot to say something about the previous question. Because I had a number one. So number one was learning how to clean the data. Did I say communication yet?
I don't think so.
Okay, so number two is communication. So since you're going to be talking to a bunch of different audiences, you have to learn how to speak to different groups of people and adjust accordingly. So some groups aren't going to listen to how you did everything, and they care more about how it impacts them. Others might care more about the modeling techniques you use, and they will fact check you. So it's good to be prepared for all situations. And you also have to learn how to get key questions from stakeholders. Like some groups might come to you and say, analyze this data. And that's a valid ask, but you need to ask them, okay, why? What are you trying to answer? And this is the key difference between an impactful data science project and simple data exploration. Okay, so this question, the next one, the ML and AI question. So I mean, data science is a new hot thing. So because there's more buzz and talk about machine learning and AI, it's given me more opportunities since people are seeing more applications around it. So you'll see a ton of jobs out there. It doesn't mean that the people who are posting the jobs know what they're talking about necessarily, but there is buzz around it. And also, it's easier for me to look things up that I might not know now versus like years ago, looking through like pages of Stack Overflow. For example, I'm pretty bad with regular expressions, which is something you use to parse out text data. And to me, it's like a whole other language. And ChatGPT has been my best friend in this. Um, and actually, at my work, there was a whole seminar on how we could use ChatGPT at JPL. And like, there was a whole big spreadsheet of people gathering like use cases. So that was pretty cool.
Wait, that's actually really cool that JPL is like kind of like encouraging GPT because like from what I've
Yeah.
seen in the news, like a lot of companies are kind of scared because like AI almost takes over their jobs and stuff. So I'm glad that like JPL like it's kind of like embracing it and
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some groups who might not be. I can only speak for the machine learning side of things, like those folks. We have someone who's like a big proponent of it, and they're trying to push it more and more to other JPLers so they can see the applications. Um, and In terms of AI taking over our jobs, there's a part of it, like the human aspect, that you can't really replace. the back and forth with the stakeholder, like that's not something an AI can do. So yeah, I'm not super worried about that for now. We'll see a few years down the road.
And I think that might have been the last closed question. So if any of the audience has any questions, Vivian should be happy to answer it.
Uh,
I guess I'll go first then. So as someone who just started learning data science, how would you or what would you encourage for me to do so that way I could eventually be ready for college, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's already cool that you're reaching out to people like on LinkedIn and stuff. But I was not that ambitious in high school, so huge props to you and your team. So you're already on the right track. I guess right now in high school, I would try to look up data science projects. Even if they're like really basic projects, you can start to work on them or follow along existing ones. In general, it's really good to have project experience, even if you don't have on-the-job experience. In the future, all of your professional work will be project-based and on teams. So it's important to really hone these skills. And if you go on Kaggle.com, I'm not sure if you heard of that, but they have like data competitions and people upload data sets. And it's an awesome resource for you to start off with. And you can see like what other people have done with the data, like step by step. And I guess right now this is not as applicable because you're still in high school, but eventually you'll want to practice for job interviews and get comfortable talking about yourself. Shout out to all the fellow introverts. You're gonna have to present things technically. So they're gonna ask you a bunch of technical questions. You might have coding interviews, but also you will probably do some sort of final presentation. So get good at presenting to different groups of people.
And then I think some people have questions in the chat.
Okay, let me see. Do you have any advice? Oh, so someone asked me, do you have any advice for someone who wants to go into data science, but is close to graduating and hasn't taken stats or ML courses in undergrad? I recommend going online and honestly like self-learning. There's something called Data Camp that I think is really helpful. There, anything with like hands-on courses is really helpful. Like just reading about it is all theoretical, but any class that has you like practicing coding. So I think Data Camp would be a good start. I know some people who have done like data boot camps. So those could be helpful, but they're paid. Data Camp is also paid, but it costs less than in like a full-on boot camp. And I think in general, just really getting into the projects, especially if you're close to graduating, because that's like one of the first things people will ask for when you're interviewing for jobs. Another question, how much do you make if you feel comfortable with answering? 125K. What were some classes that you took that helped you prepare for your major? Definitely the data mining class. That one was honestly the biggest one. It really helped me see how you could use data science, but anything like really coding based. A lot of the math ones were helpful. Like, for example, sampling methods were really helpful, especially if you go to something more applied. But there's some that weren't like super helpful. For example, I took like a financial stats class. It was all right, but I'm not in finance at all. So that wasn't super helpful and it was very hard. So I guess it would depend on what you want to do, but generally like any coding based class and like things that you could use for multiple different fields, unless you know exactly what you want to specialize in. What type of organizations or clubs will help with this career? So shout out to data at UCI. I mean, anything like that is really helpful. Data science at UCSB was really helpful for me. So you get a chance to like talk to people who work in industry. A lot of the times with recruiting, alumni will reach out to those clubs first. So for me, I actually found someone through data science at UCSB for my old job when we were hiring. So honestly, like I went to them first and then I sent it out to like the stats department or something. So yeah, I highly recommend those types of clubs.
Hey, Vivian. I have a
Hey.
technical question for you.
Okay.
So one of my favorite stories from data science is the origin of survivorship bias, the B-52 armament study in World War II, because it
Okay.
really demonstrates how even the questions that we ask shape the conclusions that we draw out of data science. So at JPL, what methods do you use from start to finish to determine that the conclusions that you're drawing are the ones that you want to draw, or that they are the story you want to be telling? And have those methods changed before and after machine learning?
So I guess like to start off with, I would say that from my role, I'm not trying to tell a particular story because that would be extremely biased as from my role in the Office of Inclusion. Like that's like, no. But I do try to ask them like, okay, so what are your assumptions first? So then that way, like it helps guide what I'm looking for in the data. And depending on how they answer that, I look for whatever in the data and then it's like confirmed or not confirmed. And then I guess from there, that would shape the conclusion. I really try not to sway the stakeholder one way or another, at least from my role. And in terms of before machine learning, I never had a life before machine learning. I think that was before my time, Caleb. Let's see. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. Thanks.
Okay. Also, Caleb's one of my JPL friends, so he's grilling me.
I had to throw one at you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. What are some overlooked skills that you think are important at your current job right now? So I say this a lot because it is overlooked. Definitely the human aspect to it. So when you're in school with a bunch of these like CS students, you'll see that a lot of them like, but it's hard to connect with some of them. I don't know how it is now, but when I was in school, it was like everyone's like keeping to themselves. And like as you go more and more into your career, you realize it's not all coding, it's not all math. When you interact with the stakeholders, and for example, if you present some model predictions that are 99% accurate or something, but you don't know what to say about it, or you don't show how it's relevant to the stakeholder, then it's not impactful. Then they're not gonna be able to see like what's the story, like what can they do with it. So make sure to always come back to the stakeholder and ask for feedback. And it's always going to be this iterative process of back and forth, and that's part of the machine learning model process. You get some results, you like them, you don't like them, you go back, fix the data, and then train the model again. And hopefully at the end of it, you get something that's useful for the stakeholder. What's the difference between data analysis and data scientist? So that's a really good question. So I would say that data analysts would focus a lot on like reporting. So like what is going on in the data, a lot of exploration, and a lot of it does cross over with data scientists. Data analysts might not do machine learning. And for example, like NLP and stuff, like that's something they might pass on to someone who knows those concepts. Data scientists do everything that the data analyst does, plus machine learning and more predictive concepts. And And sometimes when you're applying to jobs, people who are hiring might not know the difference between one or another. So if you apply to a data analyst job and you see that they're listing everything like a data scientist does, like that's like, you can tell like, okay, they might not know exactly what they're looking for. Same thing with data scientists. If they're asking you to do a ton of SQL queries and like backend stuff, they're looking for a data engineer, not a data scientist. So yeah, there's like some important distinction, but they do overlap. And sometimes like you end up with like a broad spectrum of responsibilities. So from beginning to end of the whole process. What's your best advice for people in high school right now? I guess like best advice in general for high school, college, I guess don't be afraid of joining competitions or putting yourself out there. So for example, Ethan reached out to me on LinkedIn. That was so cool. Like I wish I were like you in high school. So yeah, I think that's like really good. That's really good to do. And for all of the shy students out there, like don't be afraid to reach out to the professor and volunteer in class. You know a lot more than you think, and probably just as much, if not more, than that loudest kid in the class who likes to argue with the professor. And I feel like we all know someone like that, or if you don't, you will know them. So yeah. Is data scientist a hard career to find a job in? So you'll find a lot of jobs for data science. Like a lot of companies are looking for data scientists, data analysts, data engineers. The process to get into the job can be pretty tough depending on where you apply to. So oftentimes there will be several rounds. There's probably a technical portion, and then probably like some sort of panel interview. So for reference, I've done a lot of interviews with other companies, and there was one that was like 5 rounds long and they totally led me on. So that's not fun. And for JPL, so it was 3 rounds, so more reasonable than 5 rounds. But the first round was like with HR, and it was just the phone call to see like if they like me. And then the next round was the technical portion where they asked me a bunch of concepts about machine learning, statistics. They showed me an example data set and asked me like what I would do with it. They asked you about like prior experience. And a lot of it was like, how would you deal with this situation or this situation, but from a technical perspective. And then the last one was like several panel interviews from like 9 a.m. and it ended at like 1. It was all online, so it was fine. But like that one, it was just multiple panel interviews with different stakeholders who I actually end up working with now. So, and that part had like a final presentation, and it was like the best presentation I had ever given like in my life. Like, I don't think I could have done better. So, yeah, so it's not hard to find a job, but to actually apply and go through the process can be kind of tough. Oh yeah, so how was your interview process for your current job and how did it prepare? So I guess everything I said above. And how did I prepare for it? For the technical portion, I just looked up like a bunch of machine learning concepts, like things that I think they would ask just based on like other interviews that I've had. And then I just tried to memorize them, or since it was virtual, like, you know, have a little thing on the side, it's okay. And for the presentation, I just went through it like a million times over and over and over. I gave the presentation to different people. I don't have many friends who are in the data science field, so I actually gave the presentation to non-data science people too. And the actual project that I presented was based on something I did with the Navy, but I wasn't allowed to share the data because it belonged to the Navy, and that's illegal. But I found some similar data online for the city of New York, and I basically redid the project, but a simplified version. So yeah, and I presented it using Tableau, and then it was like a whole like presentation with like slides. I have it up online to share too if you wanted to see it. It's on Tableau Public.
If there isn't any more questions, I think we can wrap up the webinar because we only have 5 minutes left anyways. So
Okay.
thank you so much, Vivian, for being here and spending time with us. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, feel free to like add me on LinkedIn or something. I'm online a lot, so yeah.
And yeah, thank you everyone so much. Thank you, Data at UCI, for collaborating with us. And then thank you for all the guests who just saw our Instagram and wanted to show up. And yeah, that's all. Bye.
Bye.